November the 13th, 1957. In a Bronx candy store, a young American physicist named Gould pays a notary to stamp 9 pages of a notebook. Inside those pages, he has just written, for the first time anywhere on Earth, the word laser and the working design of one. The patent office will make him wait 30 years to be paid. You have used his work today. If a barcode was scanned at a register near you, if a fiber-optic cable carried any signal into the building you are sitting in, if anyone you know has had LASIK eye surgery or pressed play on a Blu-ray disc, you have used the device described in that 1957 notebook. The word for that device, the 4 letters LASER, Gould put on paper first. The patent for it went to someone else. The Nobel Prize for it went to someone else. The candy store notebook stayed his. What you are about to learn sits in the National Museum of American History today, behind glass, a 9-page notebook with a candy store notary stamp on the front. For the next 3 decades, the United States Patent Office would keep telling him it did not belong to him. This is not a story about a genius who failed. Gould won, eventually, in the most expensive way the United States patent system can be won. He just had to outlive almost everyone who had taken it from him first. Gould was 37 years old in 1957, an American physicist, working on his PhD at Columbia University in Manhattan. The department's specialty was a quiet, painstaking branch of physics called optical pumping, using bright light to push atoms into energy states they would not normally hold. Gould's faculty supervisor was Polycarp Cush, a Nobel laureate. 2 floors above Gould's bench, another Columbia professor named Charles Townes, also a Nobel-bound physicist, was working on the same family of problems, from a different angle. Townes had already built a device that amplified microwaves by the same principle. He had called it a maser. The next step, doing it with light instead of microwaves, was the open problem of the field. Gould, working at night, saw a complete answer to it. Check fact: over the course of 3 nights at his kitchen table, he wrote out the design. The atoms would sit inside a tube. A flash of light from outside would pump them, Gould's word, into an excited state. Mirrors at the 2 ends of the tube would bounce a single wavelength of light back and forth through the excited atoms, and each pass would force the atoms to release more identical light, in step, in the same direction. He called the device a light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. He wrote the acronym out as 5 capital letters, LASER. He named the device the laser. Check fact: he knew what he had. He also knew, as every physicist in 1957 knew, that ideas in physics belong to whoever can document the date of conception first. The patent office itself instructs inventors to keep a witnessed notebook. Gould did not have a witness in the Columbia building he trusted. The same field, the same competing labs, the same Nobel track professor 2 floors up. So he closed the notebook, walked it to a candy store on the corner of his Bronx neighborhood, and asked the owner, who held a notary commission, as many small business owners did then, to stamp it. 9 pages. November 13th, 1957. The first written record on Earth of a working laser was now a notarized document. Check fact: Gould did one more thing, and it cost him a decade. He believed, on the advice of a patent attorney, that he could not file for a patent until he had built a working prototype. That was wrong. The patent office requires only a sufficient written description, not a working device. He did not file. He left Columbia to join a small private research firm called TRG to actually build the laser on a Department of Defense contract. And then the second blow landed. The Pentagon classified his own design and denied him a security clearance, citing a brief Communist Party affiliation he had renounced years earlier. Gould was now legally barred from working on the device he had invented. He could not even read his own notebook in the classified file room without supervision. Check fact: by the time Gould finally filed his patent application, he was already late, 6 months too late. Charles Townes and Arthur Schawlow, working at Bell Telephone Laboratories, had published a paper in the Physical Review titled Infrared and Optical Masers. They described the same family of devices. They had also filed for a patent. In 1960, the United States Patent Office issued patent number 2929922 to Townes and Schawlow. The foundational laser patent now had two names on it. Neither of them was Gould's. Check fact, and then the Nobel Committee called. In 1964, Charles Townes was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for the laser-Maser principle, shared with two Soviet physicists, Nikolai Basov and Alexander Prokhorov. Bell Labs took the patent, Townes took the Nobel. Gould, sidelined on his own Pentagon contract by a security clearance he could not get back, watched the device described in his notebook turn into an industry under someone else's name. Check fact. But Gordon Gould had one thing the patent office could not take away. He had a notarized notebook from November 13, 1957, dated before Townes and Schawlow's published paper, dated before their patent filing, dated before anyone else on Earth had written the word laser on paper. The patent office had a procedure for exactly this situation. It was called an interference proceeding. Gould filed one. So began the longest patent fight in American science. Check fact. The question the examiners kept asking was the one that should have ended it in a week, and didn't for 18 years. Whose notebook came first? Hearings, depositions, sworn affidavits from Columbia faculty, technical re-examinations. Gould's lawyers had to translate his 1957 pages for examiners who, by the late 1970s, had been reading laser patents for 20 years and treating Townes and Schawlow as the inventors. Gould ran out of money. He took a job teaching at a community college. The case moved to federal court. By the time the 70s were halfway over, the commercial laser industry was getting larger every quarter, without him in it. Check fact. And then, in 1977, 20 years after the Bronx notary, the United States Patent Office ruled in Gordon Gould's favor on one of the central claims. It issued patent number 4053845 to him personally. The patent covered optical pumping, the very technique Gould had described in his notebook at the kitchen table, the technique by which essentially every commercial laser on Earth is energized. Then, 10 years later, in 1987, after another decade of court battles, it issued a second key patent on the gas-discharge laser. The Brewster-window patent followed a few months after, in 1988. Check fact. What that meant, in commercial terms, was sudden and enormous. By 1987, the laser was no longer a laboratory curiosity. It was reading the barcode at every supermarket checkout in America. It was carrying long-distance telephone calls over the new fiber-optic cables crossing the country. It was inside compact disc players and laser printers and grocery scales. It was a tool used in eye surgery. Every one of those products had been built on the assumption that the foundational patents belonged to Bell Labs and had long expired. Now Gordon Gould's patents, newer, valid, his name on them, covered the same ground. The companies owed him retroactive royalties. Check fact. The licensing was administered by a corporation called Patlex, with whom Gould had partnered to enforce the patents he had fought 20 years to be granted. Court by court, settlement by settlement, the industry paid. The list of licensees became, in effect, the list of laser companies. Inside the next decade, the Patlex Gould patents would generate revenue in the hundreds of millions of dollars, paid by the same firms that had grown rich on the device the United States Patent Office had told Gould was not his. He was, finally, in his 60s, a wealthy man. He was also still not the name attached to the invention in any physics textbook on Earth. Check fact, Charles Townes had a Nobel Prize. Arthur Schawlow had won a Nobel of his own, in 1981, for separate work in laser spectroscopy. The foundational laser patent in every history book read, Townes and Schawlow, 1960. Gould had the checks. He did not have the medal, he did not have the textbook. He had a notebook in a museum case in Washington, 9 pages, notarized by a Bronx candy store owner, dated November 13, 1957, and a wallet of patents the courts had finally been forced to admit were his. Check fact. Gordon Gould died in 2005 in New York at 85. The notebook is in the National Museum of American History, behind glass. The word he wrote in it that night, the 4 letters LASER, is now in every language on Earth and in every dictionary and inside every device that needs a beam of light to do anything precise. One man wrote the word, one man wrote the design, one man took the patent, one man took the Nobel. The patent office took 30 years to admit which one of them was first. Case files on the people history forgot to thank. New cases every week.